Notification came through at 2047 in the afternoon, while I was standing at my mother's grave holding a single white lily because it was the only flower the corner shop had left. It was a text from my brother. Finally got the realtor to move on Dad's place. Signing papers Thursday. You should be happy. This is what he would have wanted. I stared at the screen. The wind off Lake Ontario cut right through my coat. The funeral director was still standing a few feet away, patient, quiet, probably used to families like mine. I put the phone back in my pocket and looked at the headstone and said nothing, because there was nothing left to say to anyone. My father had been dead for 11 days. My mother died 6 weeks before him, a Tuesday in February, the kind of cold that makes your lungs ache. They found her on the kitchen floor of the house I grew up in Oakville. Dad went quickly after. The doctors called it broken heart syndrome, which sounds like something out of a Hallmark movie, but I think they were right. He had loved her completely, and he didn't know how to exist without her. I am their only daughter. I have a brother, 4 years older, who lives in Mississauga with his wife and their 2 kids. His name is not important yet. What's important is that for 6 weeks, while I drove back and forth from Hamilton, arranged 2 funerals, notified the banks, sorted through 40 years of a life lived in that 3-bedroom house on Maplegate Crescent, my brother attended neither service. Not Mom's, not Dad's. He said he couldn't get time off work. He said his kids had activities. He said the drive was too far, which, I want to be clear, is 45 minutes on the QEW. I stood at both graves alone, 2 funerals, 1 month apart, in the same February. 2 grave sites, a few rows apart because my parents had bought their plots together years ago, which I thought was the most heartbreaking thing I had ever seen, until my brother texted me from the realtor's office while I was still standing at the second one. Here's what I knew going into that week. My parents' estate was modest but real. The Oakville house had appreciated significantly. My parents had also maintained a joint investment account, held in trust, that I had helped my father set up 3 years earlier when his memory started slipping. I had driven him to the financial advisor's office in Burlington. I had sat beside him while he signed papers. I had been the one to help him figure out online banking when the branch he'd used for 30 years closed. The total value of the estate came to approximately $890,000 between the house and the investments. I did not think about that number very much during those 6 weeks. I was too busy crying in parking lots. What I did not know, what I found out exactly 9 days after my father's funeral, when the estate lawyer's office called, was that my brother had already been there. He had visited the lawyer 2 days after Dad died, without telling me. Without mentioning it, he had brought his wife, who was a paralegal, and together they had submitted a document, a handwritten letter, supposedly from my father, expressing his wish that the house proceeds go primarily to my brother's family because, as the letter said, his daughter has always been self-sufficient and capable of taking care of herself. I sat in my car in the Tim Hortons parking lot on Upper James when the lawyer told me this, and I didn't say a word for a long time. The lawyer, to her credit, said she had concerns. The letter was undated. The handwriting didn't match the samples on file. She had not proceeded with anything and had called me specifically because something felt wrong. My hands were completely steady. That surprised me. I thought I would fall apart. Instead, I felt something click into place behind my sternum, quiet and cold, like a lock turning. I asked her to hold everything. I told her I would call her back by end of week. Then I drove home and sat at my kitchen table and opened my laptop. I need to explain something about my parents' house. 3 years ago, when Dad's memory started going, I had installed a simple home monitoring system. Just cameras at the front door and in the main hallway, plus a smart doorbell. Nothing invasive. My mother knew about it. My father knew about it. It was so I could check in remotely, make sure Dad wasn't wandering at night, make sure the stove was off. I had not thought about those cameras in months. I opened the app. The footage was stored on a cloud backup I paid for annually and had completely forgotten was still running. I scrolled back to the week my father died. On the 3rd day after his death, 2 days before my brother went to the lawyer, I watched my brother and his wife let themselves into the house with the spare key my mother had given them years ago, a key I had forgotten existed. They were there for 2 hours and 40 minutes. They went through my father's desk, his filing cabinet. At one point, his wife photographed something with her phone, a document, it looked like, laid flat on the kitchen table. I watched this on my laptop at midnight in my kitchen in Hamilton, wearing the same sweater I'd had on for 3 days. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I made a cup of tea, opened a new document, and started writing down everything I had. There was more than I expected. My father had an appointment reminder app on his tablet, the one I'd set up for him so he wouldn't miss medications. It logged every entry he'd made, time-stamped. The last entries from the month before he died showed his calendar clearly: a lunch with a church friend, a pharmacy pickup, a note that said, "Call lawyer Will," dated 10 days before his passing. That note said equal split, remind both kids. I had helped him set up that tablet. I knew his password. I took screenshots of everything. I called a friend, someone I went to university with, who now practices estate litigation in Toronto. She's not someone I speak to often, but she answered on the second ring, and when I explained what I had, she went quiet for a moment and then said very carefully, "Nadia, do not touch anything in that house until we talk." Her name wasn't Nadia. That's me. She was talking to me. I should have said that earlier. My name is Nadia. I'm 31 years old. I'm a project coordinator for a mid-sized construction firm in Hamilton. I am ordinary. I do not have a trust fund. I do not have a lawyer on retainer. I had a good relationship with my parents. I called them every Sunday, and I am the kind of person who researches her options before doing anything, which is maybe the only reason any of what comes next was possible. My friend. I'll call her the lawyer, because that's what matters. She came out to Hamilton that Saturday morning. We sat at my kitchen table with coffee, and she went through everything I had printed out. The tablet entries, the camera footage, a series of emails my father had sent to the estate lawyer's office in December, which I had found in a shared family email account my mother had set up years ago for household things, subscription renewals, that kind of thing. Dad had CC'd that address on a note confirming he wanted the estate divided equally. My brother did not know that email account existed. His name was not on it. He had not thought to check. My lawyer friend looked at everything, and then she looked at me and said, "This is a strong case. The letter he submitted looks like forgery. We can challenge it." We filed a notice of dispute with the estate. My brother called me that evening. I know he spoke to the lawyer's office because he would have been notified. He didn't know what I had yet. He was calm, almost gentle, which was somehow worse than if he had been angry. He said, "I think you're stressed from everything. This is a lot. You should talk to someone." I said, "I am talking to someone. My estate litigation lawyer." He went quiet. His wife got on the phone. She told me I was being selfish. She said my parents had always worried about me, that I'd never been stable, that this was just grief making me act out. She used the word unwell. She said if I kept this up, they would have no choice but to raise concerns about my mental state with, and I want to be exact here, the appropriate people. I wrote down the time of the call. I wrote down the exact phrase. I had already started documenting everything. What I did not tell them, I had already spoken with my parents' neighbor, a retired woman named, I will call her the neighbor, who had lived beside my parents for 22 years. She had been in the house many times over those months. She knew my father's signature, the way you know a close friend's handwriting. She had offered, without me even asking, to provide a written statement because she had a bad feeling about the whole thing. What I also did not tell them, I had gone back to the camera footage more carefully and found something I had missed the first time. My sister-in-law in the kitchen photographing that document. Then, at the desk, opening a drawer and removing what appeared to be a piece of paper, folding it, putting it in her bag. My lawyer watched that clip twice. Then she said, "Okay, we're going to be fine. I am going to skip the part where I describe the legal process in detail, because it took 4 months, and it was not dramatic in the way things are dramatic on television. It was emails and adjournments and a mediator and 2 meetings in a boardroom in downtown Toronto where my brother sat across from me and could not look me in the eye. What I will tell you is what came out. The handwritten letter was, in the opinion of a forensic document examiner hired as part of the process, inconsistent with my father's late-stage handwriting in several measurable ways. The paper type was not found anywhere in my father's home. The letter had no date, no witness, and contradicted 2 separate contemporaneous pieces of evidence, the tablet calendar entry and the December email, both of which indicated my father's clear intention of an equal division. The letter was rejected. The dispute was resolved in mediation. The estate was divided equally, as my father had intended. My brother and I have not spoken since. I do not expect that to change. His wife sent me one final text 2 days after the mediation concluded that said, "I hope you're happy." I read it once and deleted it. Here is what I did with my share. The investment account payout came through in late June. I paid off the last of my car loan, $4,200, and I put a portion toward a down payment fund because Hamilton's market is not what it was, but it's still not nothing, and I am 31 and I would like to own something someday. The rest, I divided between 2 places. The first was a memorial bursary through the foundation attached to the hospital, where my mother had volunteered for 6 years running the gift shop cart on Thursday afternoons. I named it after both my parents. It goes annually to a nursing student from a low-income background. I received a letter from the first recipient last fall. She's from Sudbury. She wants to work in pediatric care. I read her letter 3 times. The second was a small renovation to my parents' church. The community hall had needed a new accessible washroom for years, and the congregation, which skews older, had been fundraising for it slowly. I paid for it in full and asked that nothing be named after anyone. I just wanted it done. I keep the tablet. It's sitting on my bookshelf, off, but there. I don't know exactly why. Maybe because it has his handwriting in it. His notes, his reminders, his tiny, careful entries in the calendar app I helped him learn to use. Maybe because it's the thing that told the truth when everyone else was trying to rewrite it. My parents raised me to be quiet and capable, to not make a fuss, to handle things. For a long time, I thought that was a limitation, something that made me easy to overlook, easy to underestimate. I don't think that anymore. I did not lose my family this year. I found out what my family actually was. There's a difference, and it took me a long time to understand that the difference matters. The lily I brought to my mother's grave that February afternoon, the one from the corner shop slightly wilted, I had placed it at the base of the headstone and stood there for a while before the text came in. I remember looking at her name carved in granite and thinking I was not ready, that I would never be ready. I wasn't, and I did it anyway. That's the part no one tells you. You don't get ready, you just stay standing.